Hello, Giants fans, and welcome to a new edition of the Valentine's Views podcast here on Big Blue View Radio. Please like, share, and subscribe on YouTube and subscribe across the Big Blue View Radio podcast network as well. All right, we're going to talk Jets Giants today with the Saturday evening preseason game at MetLife Stadium. This one hosted by the Giants, which means we don't have to look at that stadium all lit up in green, which is really nice from a Giants perspective. It always just looks weird to me when I drive by it and it's in green. But here to help me break all of that down is Big Blue Views Rivka Boord, who also works for JetX. Rivka, I know that that me taking pot shots at the Jets is making you kind of squirm a little bit, but I can't help it.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's what that's pretty much par for the course when with the crossover, that's just what you're going to get, and it goes both ways.
And of course it does. And yes, before we even get into it, MetLife Stadium is ugly. We get it. It's ugly, but we just have to deal with the fact that it's owned by two teams and it needs to be neutral. So, yes, Giants fans, it's the Jets' fault.
Well, I mean, the Jets have always been the renters, even though technically they're not. They're still this is Giant Stadium that the Jets happen to play in.
Yeah, that is how Giants fans look at it. So we blame everything on the Jets. So it is what it is. And yes, the silly phone is ringing in the background, but we'll just have to deal with that. So that's life when you're doing a podcast from home. So we'll just deal with that. Anyway, Rivka, let's talk Jets. And Aaron Rodgers is going to play Saturday night. How do you feel about that? How do Jets fans feel about that? So, and do you think there's benefit to it, for the Jets?
So first of all, how do I feel about it? I mean, I was just hoping that wouldn't happen. Robert Saleh had mentioned, I think it was the beginning of training camp that, or even maybe the beginning of the preseasons, that Rodgers might play against the Giants. I was hoping he would change his mind. I think most Jets fans feel the same way that I do, which is basically just please don't let him get hurt. Please don't let him get hurt. And in terms of, is there any benefit? I could see there being a benefit because Rodgers, more so than even other quarterbacks, really needs to be on the same page with his receivers because he likes to throw into timing passes, that are not they're safe passes in the sense that if the receiver does what they're supposed to do, it'll be right on target. But if they don't do what they're supposed to do, the risk is pretty high because he will fit it into narrow windows at times. And so I think he does need a little bit more game action with his receivers. By the same token, is the risk worth the reward? I'm not sure about that.
It's interesting though, because you and I both know that Robert Saleh can say whatever he wants. He didn't make this decision. Aaron Rodgers made this decision. Aaron Rodgers is not going to play in a preseason game for the first time in, I think, 5 years unless he wants to play. So Saleh can say it was his choice, but it's Rodgers' choice. So if something bad happens, then Rodgers was on board with playing. So
I mean, the way Saleh said it is that they spoke to each other. I'm going to guess that Saleh might have wanted to try to convince Rodgers out of it, but again, Rodgers, like any other great quarterback, pretty much, they decide what to do with, especially veteran quarterbacks. They decide about the preseason.
pretty much. And the reality of it is this is going to be pretty much what Daniel Jones did for the Giants the other day. This is going to be one series if it goes well. It's going to be two series at most, even if it doesn't go well. They're going to get him in and out of there, and they're going to do everything they can to make sure he doesn't get hit.
I mean, you would think so. The thing is that Saleh did say it's we want to get him in there for more than just one series. He did mention that in a press conference a couple of days ago, so it could be that it'll be two. But as you said, it could be if it's successful, it could be that they would stick to one. Yeah, I mean, trying to prevent him getting hit has been very hard because the Jets' offensive line has been a disaster.
Yeah, what is the state of the Mekhi Becton Jets offensive line these days?
So they just got, first of all, they just got Dwayne Brown back off the off PUP after he was there the whole preseason. He had shoulder surgery, played the whole last year with a torn rotator cuff. So he had surgery after the season, and he finally just came off PUP. He's not. I assume he's not going to play in the game, but they did get him back. Mekhi Becton's going to start at right tackle. He started at right tackle last week against Tampa and looked dominant. So I assume that he'll be in there for sure as long as Rodgers is, perhaps a little longer because they're trying to make sure he can build up his stamina. As of now, it appears that what the Jets have been doing with Becton all offseason basically has been at the advice of Dr. Neil Elatrosh, right? The orthopedist whose name has been around the NFL, especially in recent years. So he was the one who advised them originally to keep Becton at left tackle and not to ramp him up slowly and only at a certain point to move him to right tackle. But it appears that Becton is basically being told, this is your job not your job to lose, but your job to win.
Which makes sense. I mean, they still have a very high first round pick invested in Mekhi Becton, and you have to get him out there because he is a talented guy. It's just a matter of can he stay on the field and can he adapt to the right side.
So he did play on the right side in college, although
right.
Those were his first snaps in the NFL on the right side. The bigger concern about the right side wasn't so much if he was going to adapt, but more he said that it puts extra pressure on his right knee or on his knee, the surgically repaired knee for when he plays on the right side. So that was one of the reasons that they kind of slow played him on that. I was saying from the time Becton got hurt last year that the Jets had to go into this season acting as if Becton wasn't on the team, meaning that they had to have an ironclad plan at tackle that did not include Mekhi Becton. And if the Jets don't end up succeeding this season, that could be the main reason why they did not come into this season. They stood pat in free agency. They let the pick swap prevent them from getting a tackle, although I have to say I was not too disappointed by that. And they, and if the season is a failure, the offensive line could be what does them in.
Just a quick Mekhi Becton story. I remember I was at the Combine the year that he was drafted, and Mekhi Becton, I was standing right in front as he stepped up to the podium, and the podium, they're up above us to begin with. And he's, 6'80" and 9,000 pounds. And he's the biggest human being I think I've ever seen in my life. And I went to ask him a question, and he was so big that I completely froze because he was the biggest person I think I've ever seen in my entire life. Thank God for Tom Rocket Newsday, who was standing behind me and banging me on the shoulder, like taking me out of my trance. he was so big. I went to speak and I was completely frozen. I just couldn't. I was like,
yeah.
But so that's my Mekhi Becton story. Before we get off the offensive line, I have to ask you about Joe Tippmann, about the rookie center, because I was a guy who, there was back and forth over whether Tippmann was the better center or John Michael Schmitz in the draft. And most people said Schmitz. I was a Tippmann guy. Schmitz has looked really good for the Giants. So the question, there will always be sort of a back and forth comparison a little bit. So how has Tippmann looked so far for the Jets?
So Tippmann in the preseason, he didn't play that well last week, but the first two games he played very well. The big part with him is that he was buried with the third team for a nice part of training camp. And, I think he's moved up since then, but It could be the Jets were just slow playing him, but they also seem, Saleh definitely seemed surprised that Tippmann played as well as he did in the first 2 preseason games, because the Jets had the Hall of Fame game, so against Cleveland and then against Carolina. The big thing with Tippmann, from what I could tell, is 2 things. Number one, he cannot snap out of shotgun so far. Literally cannot. The snaps have been horrific. So, and I hadn't realized this, but apparently he didn't do it that often in college. Like, most of their offense was under center. So if you can't snap, if you can't get the snap directly back, you're not starting at center. But second of all, and this is the main reason why he probably wasn't even given a shot, Rodgers probably did not want a rookie center. So even if it was Schmitz, there's a good chance, the Jets brought back Connor McGovern who was their center for the last 3 years. They brought him back on a $1.9 million deal. But he's pretty much going to be the starter until, it remains to be seen whether Tippmann can overtake him, but McGovern is going to start. That being said, this is the thing about Tippmann. You can see from the first 2 preseason games, he's very, very talented. And I could see why you thought that he was better than Schmitz. The thing is, I think Schmitz is probably the better center right now. Tippmann has a higher ceiling. So
provided he learns to snap.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, as a blocker, yeah.
Yes.
He has a higher ceiling. And I think one of the reasons is because he is just his athleticism and the way he, first of all, like, you watch him on screens and it pops out, like how he, him getting in front and pulling and just, knocking guys out. But also from what I could tell, he's a better pass blocker than Schmitz is. Schmitz might be, more refined in the run game, but Tippmann as a pass blocker is more reliable. And I think that the Jets ultimately took Tippmann because of his athletic upside. The Jets generally go for very athletic players. Their offensive and defensive schemes are predicated on that athleticism. So I think that they went with the higher upside pick. The only reason that I would say that was a mistake is because they're trying to win this year.
I wonder if Tippmann eventually ends up at guard.
So it's a good question because Tippmann, first of all, he's 6'6". So, being at center who's 6'6", it's always more challenging, trying to get his pad level low. The thing is, he did play guard. Actually, he started at guard last week. He didn't look very comfortable with it. But again, he's a rookie and he's trying to learn 2 new positions. I still think the Jets want him at center. I'm assuming that that's where his upside is. But yeah, he's going to have to learn how to snap.
Rivka, as we record this, it's midday on Thursday. The Giants made some big news Thursday morning, trading a 7th-round pick for Isaiah Simmons. Before we talk about your take on that a little bit, the Jets had kind of a busy day themselves on Wednesday with what the rest of us saw as a very surprising sort of retirement announcement by Corey Davis, although he used the "I'm stepping away from football, I'm not retiring" phrase. I'm just curious, A, did you see that coming? And B, what impact does it have on the Jets roster this year?
So I was shocked. I mean, I was absolutely blown away. And I think most Jets fans were. But by the same token, there was something not quite right about what was going on with Corey Davis from really the OTAs. He wasn't there for OTAs. They said it was because he had a second child. Then he's been missing for a lot of training camp for one reason or another. He's been away for the last week. Saleh kept just saying it was a personal matter. Then Saleh came out and said they didn't know if they were going to have Davis for week 1, and then this happened. So it kind of like, he hadn't been very involved, so it kind of felt like something was going on with him. But the fact that 28 years old and that he chooses to step away, it seems like there's something personal going on over there that is not known yet. But from the way everyone was talking with him about him, Saleh said something like, "My heart goes out to him and his family." So it sounds like there's definitely something personal that prompted this. By the same token, the Jets beat has very much been saying like Rich Cimini of ESPN even said, "Oh, it feels like Davis could get cut. The Jets could save $10.5 million by cutting him. He hasn't been here." I thought that was absolutely ridiculous because the way the way I saw it, and I think the way anyone who's really watched Corey Davis play saw it, is that Davis should have been their number 2 receiver. Allen Lazard, yeah, he was signed for $11 million a year, but Lazard has always been at his best when he's a lower volume target. And last year, when he had a higher volume, yes, his actual box score stats look nice. But the truth is, if you watch his film, first of all, he a drop machine. Catch technique is terrible. But also, he's very stiff. He doesn't create a lot of separation. He makes a lot of his, he makes his money basically boxing guys out on deep balls. So, again, he would be better off as the 3rd receiver. And Davis, who, when he was healthy in Tennessee, had 2 really good years, including one where he played second fiddle to A.J. Brown, and he put up nearly 1,000 yards receiving. So it's a big blow for the Jets, because now you have everyone in the receiving room is one spot above where they should be. You have, other than Garrett Wilson. So Garrett Wilson's their clear number 1. But then you have Lazard, who should be number 3. Instead, he's number 2. And I know a lot of people thought, no, Lazard was their number 2 and Davis was being phased out. But again, if you watch a film, if you've watched him play, that should not have been the case. Then you have Mecole Hardman, who is presumably the number 3 receiver now. I mean, Hardman couldn't get out of the number 4 in Kansas City. You'd think that a guy with that kind of speed would find a way to crack a little bit more playing time. The thing is, he's extremely raw as a route runner. He served best as a gadget player and occasional deep threat. So that's not a guy you want as your number 3 receiver. And then number 4 is Randall Cobb, who I think that there's a misunderstanding out there that he's completely washed. He's slow at this point, but he's still a pretty decent route runner. So he can get open when you need it over the middle. But again, as a number 5 receiver, I was thrilled to have him. I know a lot of people were like, oh, Rodgers is just bringing in his friends. I thought it was a good move. But as a number 4 receiver, I don't know about that.
So let's talk about, let me ask you to put your Giants hat on for a second and just give me your take on the Isaiah Simmons trade by the Giants that sort of came out of left field on Thursday morning and feels to me like a really good trade for a guy like Wink Martindale, who loves his positionless defense. Even if Isaiah Simmons doesn't have to be a star for the Giants, in my view, to be a guy that helps this team.
So I see it as a no risk, potentially high reward kind of move. Again, trading a 7th round pick. How many 7th round picks? Notwithstanding some of maybe the Giants, but they traded almost nothing for him. They got a guy who was a number 8 overall pick, who had kind of an uneven career in his previous place because they never really figured out what to do with him as a sort of chess piece. But that's exactly the kind of player that Wink Martindale does the best with. And if nothing else, you could see it as an upgrade for some of the depth that the Giants lack at several positions, whether it's slot corner, whether it's linebacker, off-ball linebacker, whether it's edge. The Giants will put him wherever it is, just getting to the quarterback, all the different exotic blitzes that Wink likes to dial up. This is a kind of player that's perfect for that. So he doesn't have to be a star, but if he can contribute more, think about what the Giants had last year on the field. They had Landon Collins playing linebacker for a lot of this, of
Tony
time.
Jefferson and Jalen Smith.
Exactly. And Jalen Smith. Yeah. So I think that the bar for him being a worthwhile trade is basically at 0. I mean, basically all he has to do is be on the field at times, and it'll be a win for the Giants. So I see it as a good move, definitely, and I think this is a good situation for him to land in because of the way Wink plays defense.
I do as well, simply for the fact that he doesn't have to be the quote unquote number 8 overall pick in the draft. He doesn't have to play to that level to help this team, because the Giants have Kayvon Thibodeau. They have Azeez Ojulari. They have Bobby Okereke. He just needs to use his athleticism to make some plays, and he needs to be better than O'Shane Ximines. He needs to be better than Carter Coughlin.
Yeah,
to help this team.
that bar, again, the bar is low, and all he has to be is the guy who was traded for a 7th-round pick.
Right.
So it was a good move all around.
Let me ask you about a former Jet who looks like a starter for the Giants, and I think we've talked about him before. I think you've written about him, Jason Pinnock, who looks like he's going to be a starting safety for the Giants, has done some incredibly athletic things. And, I like this kid. I think this kid has tremendous upside, and you can see with the way he's playing, you can see why the Giants were comfortable in letting Julian Love go.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, again, Jet fans were very upset when the Jets cut Pinnock last year. Um, he had transitioned to safety the year before, and people were very excited about the games he played. Yeah, he had some not so great lapses in coverage, but overall he looked like, a guy who was worth developing. So then when the Giants picked him up, Jets fans were very, very upset. The thing about Pinnock that I think I wrote was that I still believe that his best spot is being in the box more. Again, Wink likes to use him as a blitzer. The thing is, last year, it's funny, I was going through that film, the film that we didn't end up posting in my article. But one thing I found is that when Pinnock was near the line of scrimmage, he almost always blitzed last year. Very rarely did he, occasionally he didn't, but more often than not, like you saw Pinnock anywhere near the line and he was coming. And I think that opposing defenses knew that because his role was so sort of splintered. It was like either he was playing 20 yards off the line of scrimmage or he was playing right there and he was coming. So I think mixing it up with him a little bit more, playing him in the box, but not necessarily blitzing, having him come up, fake a blitz, and then back out of it, which he did from time to time. But again, a lot of times he would blitz. So he, just and letting him kind of use that athleticism in the run game and as a, again, in coverage closer to the line of scrimmage, I think that might be better for his skill set. We'll see what the Giants end up doing with him because he played a lot of deep safety last year. He played, again, the same way the Giants sort of rotated their safeties, deep. Like Love played plenty of single high snaps, even though, again, you think of him more also as the guy that was closer to the line, run game, tackler, aggressive kind of downhill type of safety. But I mean, I'll be curious to see how the Giants use Pinnock because I still think that McKinney is better suited for that single high role than Pinnock is. And now they'll probably switch it up. But again, McKinney in the year before Wink came played like, I don't know, close to maybe 70% of his snaps deep. And then last year it was more like 57%. So I do think between the two that McKinney has more range and is better in coverage, even though he didn't necessarily show it last year. But that's my take on McKinney and Pinnock. But I do think that Pinnock has a potential to be a real, to have a big impact on the Giants.
Last thing for you, and I have to ask, obviously a lot of expectations for the Jets. We're going back to your Jets hat. Okay. So expectations are high for this team. Is this going to end well, or is it going to be a disaster?
Look, for the Jets, it always ends poorly. That's just the rule. But, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And I think after the Zach Wilson disaster, they had to shoot their shot. They had to take the best shot that they had. Whether or not it works out, it's a very hard time to be in the AFC. If the Jets played in the NFC, and especially not in the, if they played in the NFC South or something like that, obviously the path toward, through the regular season into the playoffs would be a lot easier. Again, as a Jet, someone who's followed the Jets for a long time, you always expect it to end in disaster. So you're always hedging, kind of hedging your bets on it. And it definitely has the potential to, mainly because their offensive line and the receiver situation and the fact that they play a brutal schedule. I hesitate. And it's funny, they had the Sean Payton making pretty direct comments about Nathaniel Hackett and about the Jets. He basically called the Jets the training camp not the like off-season darlings, the ones who just tried to make a splash in free agency but aren't really, actually going for it and putting in the work. That's kind of what the Broncos were in 2022. The night before he said that, I had made the same comment. So I couldn't fault him for it because I had literally said the same exact thing. I said, if everything goes poorly, the Jets could be exactly the same as the 2022 Broncos. Great, very good defense, quarterback that just can't get it going. With the offense, again, Denver lost several players to injury, so it was different. But there is definitely the potential there for a 7-10 season. If there's definitely the potential there for them to be really good. They have a ton of weapons offensively and defensively. Their defensive line looks like it's absolutely stacked. You have Quinnen Williams, who 12 sacks last year, absolute game wrecker. Sauce Gardner, DJ Reed, really good cornerback duo. Michael Carter II in the slot, really good nickel corner. Now you have to actually play the games.
Yes, you do. All right. And the Giants and Jets have to play Saturday night and get through that game before we find out how these teams set their 53-man rosters. And we'll have all the coverage you guys need of that as the Giants set their roster by Tuesday's deadline. Rivka, thank you very, very much. Giants fans. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say thanks for having me.
Always. Gotta love that Jets insight. We gotta love that. Wearing two hats at one time. Plus being a mom there. You got. I know the kids are running around back there too. So
yes,
you gotta. We gave you a chance to hide from them for a few minutes.
Yes, definitely. Yes. And I will take that.
All right. Giants fans, thank you as always for listening. Please stay safe out there. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.